Hello and welcome to Sociocultural Issues Revision Screencast. Okay, so this is just a quick final check to have a look through, taking into consideration the following things. Firstly, a quick look at synoptic question potential links. I'll look at this and think, anything that's been produced in the specimens has been really, really ambiguous. Therefore, what I'm going to try and do is just show you how that kind of part one sport and society, the emergence and evolution of sport in Britain. You're looking down here and thinking, the main thing I can see linking to this is global sporting events. So the impacts of hosting a global sporting event alongside any of these contemporary issues that have led to the development of modern professional sport as we know them today. So that's something I would have a look at. Obviously, it could be other things, but I'm just going to stick, obviously, 21st century Britain, globalization. But I'm just going to start with this for now and see if you can, give you some titles. Then we'll have a quick look through and just see any of these key things that I might be able to help you or guide you towards for the exam tomorrow. Okay, so starting off then, I'll show you part one. I see this question being something along these lines. Evaluate the impact of hosting global sporting events for either. And I don't think it's going to be more than two. It might be one. So, for example, for political, if it said evaluate the impact, it might just say explain the positive and negative impacts of hosting a global event on one of these, political, economic, societal, or sporting, or it might just give you one or two. So, okay, so it's really, really, really important that you have an understanding of both the positive and negative impacts on politically, economically, societally, and sporting. You must know at least three advantages and three disadvantages of each. Please, when you get to society, okay, I put in the screencast, every single one of these is on the revision screencast I sent you on Friday night. It's also on your kind of list that I sent you in half term. So you must make sure that you get this right. Societal impacts, remember, are linked to the T-TEMPS acronym. Now, I really appreciate it if you started down on remember the societal thing. The S at the end is the fact that kind of hosting a global event can lead to societal or social integration, but it can also lead to social unrest. Remember that T-TEMPS was a hook. You used the positive and then directly linked it to a negative. You've got to try and make sure you can hook the acronym and make sure it works. I think you should start at social integration and then social unrest as you start point and work back up the acronym. So you should go from instead of starting at T, start at S and work up. Please make sure you do that. Have a look at it. You'll know what I mean when you get onto the screencast. So make sure you can look at these key things here. Remember, economic and societal are very similar. Okay, so just make sure sport, prof. Remember, you know the difference between those. Facilities, funding, organisation. R was silent, and then you've got that increased participation and profile of sports in sports that are taking part in the global event. Make sure you can give examples. It might ask you to describe the positive effects. It could ask you to evaluate. This part one is absolutely huge, which I'll come on to in a minute, because these have not come up in any AS exam yet, okay? Not once has the impacts come up. You've got to know them. You've got to know the positives and negatives. Use the acronyms where possible, but if you can't use the acronyms, of course, if there's not one, just make sure you work at this bit here, political, and then make sure you can do economic as well. Okay, so that's the part one. So I like I said, I think they'd struggle to get you to do all four because that's like a 10-mark length in itself. So then part two could ask you to do the following. Any of these. So it could ask you to evaluate the impact of commercialism on sport, performer, or spectators. Make sure, because remember, everything you've got here, commercialism, media down here, then you've also got commercialism and media. The nature of these is that you have to give positive and negative impacts on sport, performer, and spectator. So every single one has the potential to use the command word evaluate, analyze, or discuss, because you have got positives and negatives for commercialism on sport, for the performers and spectators. Make sure you learn those. You've got great acronyms for them, so make sure you have a good look through the pack and make sure that they make sense. Also the screencasts that have been provided for commercialism and media. Next one down here then, using examples to discuss or evaluate the statement, it is impossible to eliminate drug taking at global sporting events. So obviously, these reasons why people do this. It's really important for people to do well in these. However, it's really them, if you start to think about it, it's a massive, massive push for people to take part or to actually take drugs. Now, people have this kind of cynical approach, and quite rightly so, that it's impossible to eliminate drug taking in sports, but it asks you to discuss or evaluate or analyse the statement. It's really important that you just then go on to give some information. So, for example, you've got your WADA BTEC. Okay, you've got that as your start point, but if you go to your revision packs, it tells you how you analyse BTEC. Okay, so how you start with the positive, for example, I will give you one go here, how you do it. So I believe it is possible to eliminate drugs because the World Anti-Doping Association should provide kind of lifetime bans. However, they tend to get turned over. The flip side to this is that the Court of Arbitration for Sport could overturn this, so therefore there is never a lifetime ban, which stops people, or is not enough of a deterrent to stop people from taking part. And you've straight away got a double evaluation point there. You're saying one, then you're saying however, then you're coming back. Testing. Okay, so one of the good things that's being used to try and prevent drug taking or eliminate it is by having testing that's 24/7. This is known as the Adams principle, where people have to know, athletes have to give their whereabouts for 1 hour a day. So, for example, 6 to 7 a.m. Okay, at their house at this point, they will always be there. Okay, and I've got a friend who's like an elite athlete, and that was the time he gave. So before he left to go to train, he would always have that point there, so they could come there and come and test them there. So that's what the Adams principle. However, okay, it's all very well having good testing procedures, but the problem with testing procedures is that there are always people who are more advanced. They're one step ahead of the testers. They are creating drugs that people don't know about. Furthermore, when you're talking about testing there, so the 24/7 kind of testing or tracking, the other flip side to that, sometimes you have as good a testing as you have state-sponsored doping. For example, Russia. Okay, Russian government were involved in that. They were sponsoring the doping because they wanted their country to have this shop window effect for people to think they were the best. Okay, and a political and sporting superpower. Okay, so when the country is involved in it, it's very difficult for testing to actually work. You could also talk about retrospective testing. It's a good way to get them eventually. However, retrospective testing, of course, is not that good. It doesn't make it takes away the moment from the athlete who actually should have won, but they could have ended up being kind of fourth. I think there's an example in the Tour de France where somebody ended up being I think the 7th place performer actually won the Tour de France because the first 6 has been done for doping. So I think there's loads of stuff on there. Please get that right. Please make sure you have some discussion, some evaluation ready to talk about BTEC, WADA, positive, and then make sure you can flip it with that contrasting connective that's saying analyze, evaluate. So you'll say, however, in contrast to this, another point of view, the problem with this, and make sure you can do that and give examples. Use Russia, use 24/7 kind of tracking, making sure you've got some good examples there to use. Okay. Evaluate the impact of media on sport. Okay, it could say sport, it could say the performer, it could say spectators. Make sure you know the difference between those. Evaluate the impact of technology on either. So basically, you're looking now, we have got a world event going on now, the World Cup. Okay, so a global event. So then it might say that due to the kind of increasing kind of popularity of global events, technology is vital. Evaluate the impact of technology on fair outcomes or entertainment. Again, okay, when you're evaluating these or discussing them or analysing them, they are set up for you to be able to give kind of a double viewpoint. So you're looking at the fair outcomes, you're talking about your data. Okay, so data, do we remember what that stands for? Can we evaluate it? Entertainment is ramped up. Do we remember what the entertainment is? Good, but obviously the disruptions, and start to make sure you have got these revised and ready to go for tomorrow. Okay, and the other one I haven't put on here, global sporting events. Okay, obviously it could do a question part 1 on society and sport, or society particularly. Do you remember me talking about this concept of, the good side to kind of hosting a global event for society is nation building. Okay, so there's a pride in the country. The flip side to that is overt nationalism. Okay, so that process, when we talk about that, well, the problem with overt nationalism, okay, that can lead to hooliganism, and then it could have a 5th potential title that could link it to violence. So could you say the implications of violence on society? Could you give the causes and solutions to crowd violence? Okay, be ready for that. That's the 5th one that you could link it to. Okay, let's have a quick run through for tomorrow then. Key things that I kind of put together for AS, so will be linked to you. The key topics you could come up with. Make sure you have a good idea of pre-industrial Britain. You need to know this. That's your first Clegit. That's making sure your 2 classes and you can apply it all the way down the acronym. Remember, only give a class link to 1 sport each, and then you must go down. You must go down and talk about the other parts of the other social and cultural factors. Post 1850 industrial Britain. Make sure you can talk about these key areas there and how they changed. Transport, give examples of railway. That meant that they could take part in leagues, national competitions, FA Cup, time, Saturday half day, and you can look at the screencast for those. Post 1850s public schools, I think this is really likely. It did come in the AS exams, but the AS exam was on this, cult of athleticism, so make sure you know how public schools promote and organise games. That's you're talking about what did they have, who did they have, and how did they promote the values. Going down to here then, 20th century Britain. Now this is a really good, fun, difficult one. 20th century Britain, remember there's lots of things that happened in 1975 with regard to gender. So the Sex Discrimination Act, that started to allow women more chance to participate. Then you had the 84 LA Olympics that allowed women to take part in the marathon. That's some stuff linked to gender. But this is one that I think could be, as you know, they seem to be going pretty mad with the old discuss or evaluates questions. Let's make sure that we have an understanding that class dictated sports as amateur and professional to an extent in 20th century Britain. Also 21st century Britain, make sure you can answer a data question. I'll show you that in a second. And just quickly, obviously these you've just been through, make sure you can do freedom of movement. How did globalization promote freedom of movement? Well, you must make sure you talk about players travel abroad for training camps and tours. Make sure you know that. That's really likely for a 2-mark question. Let's have a look at this question here then. Just quickly, you can have a look at it. Discuss the effect of class and taking part in sporting activities as amateurs and professionals. But I'm just going to leave this and ask you to pause it because I don't want to run out of time. So if you want to have a look at that, it's an example of how you discuss the impact of class, impacting upon kind of amateur and professional participation in sport. So just a quick one. This is a harder question. Let's move on then. Data question. If you get something like this, which I put into that past paper earlier, okay, it's really important bit of information here. You will get 3 marks for saying what you see with regard to data. Okay, so easy. So you look at this and it's asking you to use a figure and your own knowledge, analyse how changes in transport affected sport between 20th century and today. You can see here, it just asks you to put down exactly what you've seen in there. Say what the figures are, write it down. And then it asks you to do a little bit of your own opinion. So if you've got a car, it can increase participation. Why? Because you've got a car and you can go and actually go to the gym when you want to go. So it gives you flexibility there. Spectatorship, you can go watch more sport. Then it's got down to here. It can actually reduce participation because people are more interested in doing things in their car maybe than actually taking part in sport. So that's an example on that. I think it's just really important. You're going to get probably something to do with 21st century Britain, and it's going to give you some data. It's probably going to say that participation has decreased. Make sure you have an understanding. Just say that strategies haven't worked from the government, from Sport England. They haven't allowed it to increase. But this is just an example there of a data question, just so you know that you can get 3 marks by just saying what you see. Let's have a look then. Final bit on here. I'm just going to run through these final bits on this section. You are likely to get something on drugs or violence, and it's likely to be as a short 2-mark question on the implications to society, sport, performer. Remember, roll moth, okay, and roll moth always should now have roll moth reputation, okay, because reputation will always be damaged for the performer, for the sport, okay. On top of here, make sure you can separate implications to society, sport, performer, okay. Again, roll moth, rep. Make sure you know that it's a negative role modeling, negative reputation, bans, fines, and just make sure you go through these sections because these are new in the spec, therefore they seem to be really hell-bent on doing it. New spec, okay, so you're looking at this, make sure you know the difference between match fixing and illegal sports betting. A perfect little 1-mark, 2-mark question. Commercialism, media, you will need to be able to discuss, evaluate and analyse the impact on sport, the performer, spectators. Make sure you know a plus and a minus, use your acronyms. Don't forget the world-class programme. on this bit here, really important that you have an understanding of podium potential, the talent ID, moving from stage 1 and 2, or phase 1 and 2, phase 1, sorry, 2 and 3, and then your confirmation phase, and make sure you've got an idea of those. UK Sport, nice, easy, like 1-2 markers here, you might have to use, make sure they're in. And finally, technology. Make sure you know. FAMES for participation and performance, give some